they can be maximised for more vulnerable residents of Kirklees, and evidence from other areas where similar issues have been considered to reflect on their experience. Oh, that will be me speaking again then. Right, thank you. Apologies for that slight technical hitch. So we've had a couple of meetings now to discuss the different areas, and we have had already right. So we've heard already from a representative from a registered provider, a representative from Leeds Council where they took the housing management in-house from Almos, and we were due to have today representative from an Almo model. Unfortunately, we've not been able to make that happen for today for different reasons, and so the panel will take that information in a possibly a different format, hopefully next week. Okay, so that we ensure that we get information from all three types of model from external perspectives. I think that's important. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Right then, so we now move on to the item which is the voice of the tenant item. I think we said last time that we felt it was really important to hear the voice of the tenant through this process and to ensure that the voice of the tenant is heard throughout the process. Therefore we opened it up for TRAs to be invited to come and attend the meeting today. So, are you okay if we ask questions and you just talk to us, yeah, about how you feel? So if we just a moment. Do you need the facility for? You want me to shout? Yeah.
Pretend you're a tenant. You'll shout when you're a tenant, don't worry.
Okay. So if we open it up to a couple of questions and then we'll open it up to yourselves to speak. So one of the items that we are looking at is outcomes for vulnerable tenants, and how the model that is any model that goes forward can ensure that vulnerable residents, both tenants and leaseholders, have a good service going forward. So how would you, in your experience, think that vulnerable tenants can be the outcomes for vulnerable tenants could be enhanced in some way? Do you have any?
Madam Chairman, could you define vulnerable tenants, please?
I think it's a sort of a catch-all phrase for people who might need a bit more help.
Yeah, do you mean elderly tenants or?
Young who need a bit more help, or anybody who might need a bit more help.
Well, then can you define support, please?
Yeah. The lady at the back, you want to just press the
That's it, it's on. Oh, that looks good. What I was just going to say was I was been thinking about this a bit now, and I'm up Berry Brow. I do some voluntary work up Berry Brow. And there's quite a lot of what you call vulnerable people that live there. Now, it's okay doing this to the vulnerable people, giving them somewhere to live, making sure they've got a roof over their head, and then we've got the food and things like that. Where is the support for those after? Because it's just like, you've given them somewhere to live, they can get on with it now. To me, up there, and I know because I speak to a lot of them, it's the support after that you've given them somewhere to live, that there doesn't seem to be any. And it, you know, there's young ones there, there's middle aged, there's older, but I just feel that it's like, yeah, we've given you somewhere to live, but after that, it's fend for yourself.
Just say, if you want to speak, can you press your button, because it's not just us in the council chamber, people on the webcast won't be able to hear. Okay, all right. Linda, do you want to...
Thank you. Can I just follow up on what you just said? What do you think is missing once they have got into their tenancy? What do you think would then help to allow them to continue and get the support that they do need then?
Well, like I said, there's a variation of vulnerable people that live up there. So I couldn't just specifically say one thing. It'd have to be, like you said, because it's varied. It'll just have to be when you put somebody in there that's vulnerable, is to have whichever way they're vulnerable, is have the backup there for that individual. That's what I'm saying. So I can't, like I say, I can't just say one thing. It's when you put somebody into that home, there has to be a net at the other side to help them. Because like I say, it's all right saying, well, there's your home, you've got somewhere to live, that's lovely. But there's no support for that person after, whatever, you know, problem that they've got.
And that's what I meant.
Mm. Yeah, I meant that.
Could I just say, you're talking about vulnerable tenants. What about the vulnerable tenants that make the other tenants vulnerable? I mean, that also needs looking at.
Yeah.
Yes.
Afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for coming along today and speaking with us about your experience. What I wanted to ask you was about your relationship with K&H, Kirklees Neighbourhood Housing, or the council. So if you do come across vulnerable tenants, you know, how do you deal with it? How do you treat it? Do you approach Kirklees Neighbourhood Housing, and what sort of responses do you get? Do you feel that they're easy to work with?
We have a case where there is a really vulnerable tenant in the area where I live, and we did contact social services, but they weren't interested.
Plus the fact we did have a vulnerable tenant, and we went all down every avenue through our estate managers, everywhere else, and it hit a dead wall. Now this lady was truly vulnerable, and it didn't end up nice because the young lady committed suicide because of other,
Just be careful.
for the want of better words, riff-raff on the estate that made her life a misery. But this went on for 18 months, 2 years, and that was in our area.
Thank you. One of the areas that we're looking at as part of our terms of reference is if we brought social housing back into control, back into the council's control, whether that would make a positive difference for tenants. And you mentioned about making a referral to social services, and unfortunately, nothing come of it. But what we're looking at is, if it was brought back in-house, is it likely that the relationship between housing and social services will be closer together? And whether it's likely to improve the outcomes for tenants?
Well, that would remain to be seen if the housing stock went back into the hands of the council. But these people who are so vulnerable need help from somebody. I mean, this lady was... it's not the same one that my colleague was speaking about, but she really needed help. And when I contacted social services, they just said, well, the lady has to request help herself. She wasn't fit. She was in no way fit to ask for help. So And she's still on the estate.
Can we just, it's because we're webcast, etc., and it's a public meeting, you just need to be careful that nobody can identify any individuals. Okay, all right. But it's important to get the point across. Yeah.
So aside from vulnerable tenants then, are there any other types of tenants that you come across where you're having to sort of discuss the circumstances with K&H or the council?
I'm going back to vulnerable. I used to help out down at Berrybrow, and someone used to come from K&H to help them with rent inquiries, applying for jobs. She was brilliant. They were queuing up to see her, and all she did was get a laptop out, and she was there all 2-3 hours with them. And K&H took her offers, saying they couldn't afford. So these people, they were still coming. When so-and-so coming, when so-and-so coming. Well, no, they've finished. She's not coming anymore. She was there to help them get a job, sort the rent out if they got into arrears, sort the council taxes if they got into arrears, apply for jobs, help them with the benefits. And K&H took her offers, saying they couldn't afford anymore.
Could we maybe get a response from K&H and officers as to what the current processes and strategies are for helping people with vulnerabilities, and maybe a direct response to that lady's point? Thank you.
Joanne Bartholomew, Chief Operating Officer for K&H. The issue of vulnerability is one that's quite complex, and the colleagues across have touched on the different types of vulnerability that individuals can have and present with. And some individuals can identify as being vulnerable, and some individuals don't personally identify as being vulnerable. Hence why sometimes there is some difficulty within the wider systems beyond K&H and the council as to whether or not somebody needs help, requires help, or even wants help in a set of circumstances. There are a number of things that both K&H alongside the council as a partner and the wider social services do. So particularly if an individual who lives in one of our homes is known to be vulnerable to us, then there are all sort of wraparound measures that we can put around them. We do run employment support, and it is an area which in the last couple of years was cut back, and I recognise that hasn't had an impact, and it is positive to hear that it had a positive impact back then. We still do have an employment support team, and that has a high success rate in terms of putting people back into work and helping them obtain educational qualifications and careers. There's also income support that we wrap around people who are facing financial difficulties. In terms of mental health type support, that is one of the most complex areas. It is a misnomer that people are vulnerable because of their age. That is not necessarily the case across the people who live within our homes. People can present at all ages with complexities around them. And we do rely on information, not only from our housing officers on the ground and our estate caretakers, but from colleagues across the wider adult and children's social care, and our own property maintenance colleagues who will go into houses to look for those particular clues. What I would say is that where we do find individuals who we think we need support, the system will wrap around them and signpost them to support. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will choose to access that support, and it doesn't necessarily mean, given the constraints of the wider system, that support will be as much as they perhaps need in those circumstances.
Thank you for that. So I think what I'm getting from that is that you do have systems, processes in place to help people with vulnerabilities, and you have a good working relationship with the council, but there's only so much you can do, and you're relying on other services to come in and fill the gaps, as it was?
I wouldn't consider it to be gap filling. I think across the public sector as a whole, so across ourselves, across the council, across our partners in Locala and the wider health service and the school service, GPs, etc., there is a need for us to not create those gaps. So I don't think we're looking for people to fill the gaps. What we're looking to try to achieve, and it is a work in progress, I think it works across K&H and the council, it works better than it does across some areas, but I think that would be true for other areas as well. What we tend to find is that everybody has a willingness to want to make somebody's life better. Sometimes the system can get in the way of that. Sometimes the system can be a help for that. I have seen progress, particularly with some of the early intervention and prevention strategies that have come out from the council and the work that they've done with schools, etc., that has filtered into the people who live within our homes at K&H and how that supports them. Certainly there probably is a way to go with other areas such as mental health.
Just one quick more follow-up. So in the case when you're making changes to support services, whether that be adding additional services or cutting services for whatever reason that may be, are tenants consulted on those decisions, or are they made without consultation? What's the process?
So under my tenure, I don't believe we've cut any aspects of services. However, there would be a whole host of groups that we would need to consult with. The main of those is the council. We are obligated by the council to deliver a set of services and to deliver those to a particular standard. And any deviation from that sort of management arrangement would need to be consulted with the council. So, for example, we are changing some of the enhanced lettable standard that we do for some of our properties. That was done in conjunction with a piece of work with the council. It went to the tenant forum before Christmas. It has gone to tenant and leaseholder panel for them to give a view. The progress of that piece of work will throw through them for them to understand the impact of that. So the answer to your question is yes. For other things, they're quite often some aspect of co-production. I think in a previous one of these meetings we touched on fire safety and the input that the tenant and leaseholder panel has had to enriching that document on the fire safety across K&H.
Thank you. I think maybe if people are still going to ask for information and there is the support there, maybe some signposting so that people know where to go, I think would help. Do you want to come in?
I just want to come in about all your strategies are really nice when they're down on paper and things like that, but picking up on what you've just said about, the people that want the help, it's there for them. There was nothing there about these people that don't think there's anything wrong or there isn't anything there to say, well, you've got to come to us. What about those people? Because I'm telling you, there is a lot of those that need the support that it's not there for them. Do you know what I mean? If I want help, you're just saying, yes, you can signpost me to A, B and C, but there's a lot in this net, I'm telling you, that don't think they want the support or don't want to ask for the support. What about those people, because that's the ones that they're missing out on. Thank you, love.
Do you want to come back on that quickly and then I want to...
Yeah. I think there's some very fair points being made there. So when we start a process with say a new tenancy, for instance, or a relet, we get to have formal contact with those individuals or those households. So we get an understanding of the needs of those families or individuals, and are able to identify potentially with them what their support requirements might look like. And it's difficult to define what support is because it's tailored to individuals and families. So it depends on what circumstances are being presented. But then once somebody becomes a tenant, say we thought at that point and mutually that there was no support need at that point, we don't put anything in place because there is no requirement. Circumstances around life change. There's lots of things that happen in society. As a landlord, we can't have all the visibility of every single tenant. We run 22,500 tenancies. So There is a safeguarding duty on council, so whenever our property repair people go in or our housing officers have contact with tenants, if there is something that we notice that might alert us to issues of vulnerability, then we will try and pick those up. So we do need, I guess, the voice of the tenant in the way that we're hearing it today to be amplified throughout our processes, and we need to work together much more as partners in the future. So if you were to come to the council or K&H and say we think there's a problem, you might want to have a look, then we would have to act in our safeguarding duty to try and understand whether that tenant is vulnerable, whether they think it or they don't think it. I understand the point you're making, but that is a general societal issue where people might need help but don't feel they want to or feel they need to, and we have to work with people as opposed to doing things to and for.
Can I ask, because I think it's what I'm picking up is it's about visibility. Yeah, it's about visibility. So this scrutiny panel is about the future provision going forward. And so can we sort of pick up that visibility thread then and ask about how you feel that tenants should be engaged going forward? And also, we're looking at 3 models, so a registered provider, an ALMO, and bringing it back in-house to the council. How would you feel that visibility and that tenant engagement and discussions with yourselves should be within that process? And do you have a model or several models that you would feel would be better for a tenant perspective? Right, that's quite a lot there. Okay.
My argument is, quite a few years ago you had CAFTA. They had 97 tenants and residents associations up and down Kirklees, north, east, south, west, they were everywhere. And everybody found out things. Now you've nothing. The amount of tenants and residents association that have folded because they haven't had help, they've asked for help, they haven't got it, and they've folded.
Well, I found that the more we've tried, there's no accountability from Kirklees to the tenants. We make several complaints, we bring several things up in our TRA meetings, and we get no feedback at all. We get a lot of excuses. But I think personally now as association with us, that there should be more feedback from Kirklees to the tenants directly. Sorry.
Hello. I feel that the problem really starts at the initial registration of tenants. You just do not go far enough to vet them. And when they get into the property, then it's us that have to sort it out, get people in, call the police if they're not good. And it upsets people's lives. I mean, I live here with one at the moment, and if you know what it's like having music at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's not very nice. Sorry. But you've got to call the police out, you've got to call the estate manager. Yes, she comes, she lays the rule down, you will be evicted if you don't behave yourself. But how far does this go? I'm sorry, I've finished.
Yes, where I live, we have quite a number of vulnerable tenants, vulnerable by age, ill health, disability, and with some of them they're frightened of stepping out of the doors at night because of the behaviour of the neighbours. Antisocial behaviour has made them more vulnerable, but yet dealing with it seems to be a long, slow process, and it doesn't always get results. Because we had one, for example, admittedly it's a couple of years ago now, where an elderly lady was attacked by a young man who lived next door. Yes, there's no names coming here. And she had to have hospital treatment. But the K&H managers who came along to deal with it thought, this is just a neighbour dispute. But it wasn't. And no one else, like the police, for example, or social services, no one else wanted to do anything unless they said that the housing management organisation got behind what they need to do first. And so they end up just being eventually swept under the carpet.
Can I just say, I think at the moment it would be better if we could have full-time estate managers on each estate, because we only have 3 days a week, and they can't be doing a full job if they're only working part-time. Plus, do the council not have a standard as to how tenants should keep their properties? Because it would appear to me that there doesn't seem to be a standard, because people are just allowed to leave the property in whatever state it's in, and there's no pride in a lot of these, probably the young ones who are drinking and taking drugs, and they just make the estate look like down and out places, like dumps. And it's not nice to live in a situation like that when you have pride in your home and you have to sit and look across the road at something that's just like a tip.
In our experience, we get a nice block of flats. They put one person in that's got issues, and then the nice tenants leave. But nobody inquires, oh, Mrs. So-and-so's lived there 20 years, I wonder why she's leaving. Because of the idiots that they've put in. They don't care about the nice people leaving. They just want to fill it with the people with issues, as they say, so they can get damn rent off her without having to knock a door. That's what gets my goat.
Well, can I just go back to, this is my personal thought. We do it many years ago. We're looking down the line of things have changed. We know the budget's changed. We know everything has to change. But my personal thing is they have changed where it is now a business, and it's not about what the community wants anymore. Before, like you said, we had estate management officers. We could speak to those. We had a good route many years ago. We seem to have lost that now. The TRAs seem to be out there on their own, doing. I know we've got the saying now that we're giving more to the tenants to do the self and help the self, which is fine, but they've lost that they're actually tenants and they're human beings, I think. We need to go back to that. Thank you.
Anybody panel have anything they wish to follow up on that at all? No. Linda.
I wonder whether any of you have been in your tenancies for so long that you were in them when the council ran them, before K&H came along, were you? Right. Well, I was just going to say, in your experience, thinking back to when it was in-house with the council, and now when it's with the arm's length organisation, K&H, what for you has been the difference?
Go back to how it used to be, I say. When the rent man came for your rent, and if you had anything wrong, you gave him a card with what were wrong. He took it in, they come and sorted you. Not like waiting on the phone half an hour with this stupid music blasting down your lug hole. It gets terrible getting through to Kirkley. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, we find that back when we had our little town hall in Batley, you could go down there with a complaint, it would be dealt with there and then. And as that young lady just pointed out, you get on this merry-go-round of a phone, well, you lose the will to live after 5 minutes, because these voice records, oh, press this button, press that button, wait a minute. No, we have no point of physical, no, a face-to-face contact is far better than talking to someone on the phone that doesn't care. So if we can go back to something of that nature, we're a lot better. Yeah.
I've only been in 25 years in council. Put your microphone. I've only been in for 25 years, and I used to pay my rent at Chickenley office. I used to report anything the matter with the house at Chickenley office, and it was dealt with quickly and very carefully and very well. No problem whatsoever. And then it all altered. They closed the offices. It went to this automatic situation where you're ringing up all the time. And if you aren't on internet, like Margaret said, you're a loser. So I think going back a bit, if you can go back a bit, because going forward is getting you nowhere.
No, it isn't.
Nowhere. We've got a person in our group of flats. He's living with his girlfriend. His girlfriend is the tenant. I'm not saying any names, but he's moved in. He's got anger management trouble and one thing and another. And he causes an awful lot of trouble, but nothing's ever done about it. And another thing, we hardly ever see our estate manageress because we don't have any, we used to have a monthly, what do they call them, where they used to come up and sit and talk. Surgery. Well, because there weren't enough people coming to that surgery every month, Kirklees, in their wiseness, decided to close it down. So people are coming in to us now and saying, when is the estate manager going to come? We don't know. We sound a lot of dumbos. You know what I mean? So you're fighting all the time. And I think our TRA is one of the last in line, aren't we? There aren't many of us left. But it's fighting all the time. We've got coffee morning, we've got bingo, and we try and get people in. But because there's so many youngsters now on our estate taking up flats and one thing and another, they don't want to know. We're just the old fogies. And I think that's what's going to happen to us. They're going to shut us down shortly.
It's because we use our place for voting to keep it open.
Yeah.
That's the only reason.
Yeah. But just terrible, isn't it? You get disenchanted, don't you, really?
So would it be fair to say, really, that... Because a gentleman came last time and he said... look at the outcomes that you want from the service. Look at how you want the service going forward for people. Would it be fair to say that that is what you're actually... what you're saying is you want the service to be tailored to the tenant's needs. Is that what you're saying to us?
That's virtually what I'm saying. Yes, exactly.
Sorry, go.
Why don't you employ your own work people, like a team of decorators or a team of plumbers, and you get somebody off a dole and teach them how to do things?
On the estate walkabouts that the TRA does, we go past some properties and I've said to the estate manager, look at the state of that. They've got duvets hung at windows, paper hung at windows, and they just look like dumps. And the answer to it is, we can't tell them how to dress the windows. But why can't you? Surely there's a standard as to how people should keep the property. Yes. And, making it look like a slum in a down and out area is just making it bad for other people.
And I'll bring K&H in a minute to address the point about your own builders, etc. But can I ask as well, you're talking about, when we're talking about vulnerable tenants, you're talking about health and social care and everything. So have I heard it right that you would like people to work together more to help people rather than working as individual, rather as housing working as housing and the police working as the police and the health working as the health? You would like more them to work together more to be able to solve the problems quicker. Is the gentleman here?
I think it's fair to say that before K&H was born, and I can remember back to the 90s, and I knew the area housing office people very well, and there was a service which relied upon a team that covered a specific area, and they had good local knowledge, and they were easily contactable, and they soon sorted things out, and they made decisions as well. Would an estate management officer or a service management officer as to whether something needed to be passed on for social services, for example, and which other service they needed to bring in. And they were able to deal with it more or less instantly. They didn't always get the service back instantly, but at least they got the ball in motion, you know, more or less straight away. And I think that's something that we've lost with all this centralisation, and we don't see our current equivalent of estate management officers anything like as much as we'd like to, and we've lost the service that we got from service management officers because they aren't there anymore.
Could I just say, can I just say one thing? We used to have community police, and we used to be able to, they used to come and visit us regularly, and other people from Kirklees. But you don't see anybody these days. So how can you report to somebody when they're just not there? And the community police do notice things, and they can keep an eye on things when you point it out. But you don't see anybody at all.
Does the K&H, do you want to come in with the lady's question about your own decorators and things?
We do recognise that there are a number of people who live in our homes that are not able to look after those homes as well as others may consider they should be able to do so. And one of the pieces of work that we've worked with the council doing is about understanding what our lettable standard is. So in response to that, we have looked at what we provide around decorating provision, around what we provide around window dressing and carpets, etc. To help people have the best chance of having a successful and sustainable tenancy within their home. We do actually have quite a large workforce across our property services arm. There's about 350 people working the trades there, and we are looking at that trade mix in order to be able to service some of the increase in demands potentially around things that you've mentioned like decorating. What I would say about that and that I think is very successful is that our current apprenticeship offer, and it is National Apprenticeship Week this week, is we have a specific offer that's targeted at tenants or people who live in a tenanted household to be able to get them into work, which I think helps us understand better the people that we work with and alongside. We do recognise that since K&H was born in 2002, society has changed immeasurably, and that not only technology but people's expectations have moved, and that there are challenges around how we continue to work with people in a world that's becoming more technologically enabled, but still remember that some people are not able to access that technology. We do also recognise that quite a lot of the people that present in need for homes are generally younger, and that they may have some complexities with their life. We do, however, still have a duty to home them and find them somewhere to live. And so I think your earlier points around how do we support them to have the best life possible and people around them to be impacted the least are very well made.
Going back to what that lady said about people not looking after their homes, we find a lot of these untidy gardens and untidy houses are these owner-occupiers on our estate. And they're on about, somebody said want to buy your flat back off you. Why don't you buy private rent houses back? My grandson lived in a private rented house on Shawcross, and it was a disgrace what back garden and ceiling fell, part of ceiling fell down, and he never mentioned.
Yeah, so I think
get some property
I think
back.
that's perhaps outside of our criteria at this moment in time, but we do, but K&H have indicated that they do it. So can we just talk about how going forward, about tenant engagement going forward? Okay, because we're going to, in a little while, we're going to be talking about how the officers can engage with tenants going forward through any process of change in how the houses are managed, and how the tenants' engagement moving forward can engage with across the younger people as well as people in work and more, shall I say, more mature tenants. How do you feel that there could be improvement or there could be changes to engage across tenants and leaseholders?
Can I just say, they have a situation up in, I mean, I'm not saying it should be the same as Scotland, but when a property's coming empty in Scotland, they allocate it before the people that are in situ move out. And the new prospective tenant goes to the property and can make a deal with the current tenant with carpets, fireplace, doors, anything that they want leaving in the property. And that would save Kirklees money if they did things in that way, instead of having to just rip everything out and put all new back in when a new tenant comes in. It would save a lot of money for Kirklees. Yeah, but this is done in Scotland in their council property.
So how would you like to the council to talk to yourselves about any changes in provision moving forward? How would you like them to talk to you?
I'm pressing it. Is it on?
Yes, I'm pressing it.
Well, there's two things I'd like to say here on behalf of K&H. They're doing the best that they can. Thank you. But going forward, it's like we're saying, we've done a full circle now about, we started at the beginning, like Ken said, we had everything there in place and it runs smoothly. It really did run smoothly, didn't it? TRAs had contact, like Ken said, with the EMOs. We had meetings with CAFTA. We had meetings with the councillors. We knew where everything was going because we was involved from the beginning. That has gone. Because a lot of the TRAs has gone now because there's no help for them. Like I said, CAFTA's gone now, so there's no help. So we have to look at what we've got now to move forward. So stepping back slightly, why can we not go back to the meetings that we used to have where the tenants and residents were involved right from the beginning? Like you said, with strategies, with meetings, all that. It's not much to ask that, is it, is to go back to inviting us to the meetings. Don't come at the end and go, this is what we're doing. How do you like that? Well, you've already made that decision. That's how we feel. You've already made that decision because we wasn't there from the beginning like we used to be. And like you say, if you get involved then, instead of just like one meeting now being involved, we would have been involved right from the beginning and moved. I think it would have run smoother. Because like you say, your estate management officers, we've hardly got any now. And I know this is going off on one, but I have a big problem with the money side of it, because if you've got a budget there, and that's what that budget is for, why haven't we got them? I know that's going into too much, but that's how I'm looking at. You've got these budgets, so why haven't we got what your budget says that we're supposed to have? Because I'm sure you've got a contract that says you're supposed to have so many from A, B and C. That's gone and all. At one time I could tell you all that, but now we can't.
When whatever model is taken forward, you want discussions early, yes, about not just about how services are going to be delivered, but those strategic decisions as well. So if we say, for instance, something came up recently, was it the enhanced lettable standard that came up recently? That to be discussed, something like that, that's a strategic decision to be discussed early with tenants and leaseholders, and so you can input going forward, etc. But also on the sort of the delivery of services side, so if locally something's going to change or something's going to, a new service going to come in or whatever, that would be on the estate, also to be involved in those discussions early to shape how that would work. Am I reading that how you right?
Yes, that is exactly what we mean. At one point we used to have a tenants and residents forum, and then we had the big forum where everybody was there, and every decision that was going forward, that was brought to us on the agenda, wasn't it? We could all discuss it. And it was like, oh, well, it didn't seem to be moving anywhere because we wasn't making the decision, but we was there actually having our input. And they went. So all that, and it was from all areas, wasn't it? We all came from every area, from every TRA. I know there's not as many now, but that is where we had our discussions and we could talk about the things that was being brought up, have our input. That's another one that's gone.
But now we're being told.
So, yeah.
Can I ask as well then, because not everybody wants to engage with a TRA, with all due respect, not everybody wants to engage with TRA, so that they would like different ways of being involved in that. So do you think that ought to be explored as well, so that the different, if they want to engage in different ways, that is possible? The gentleman?
Yes, I agree with what Anita said and some more of my colleagues over here. And I think what we're looking for really, and what we need as tenants as well, not just as TRAs, we need communication and we need dialogue, and we need that from the beginning.
Yes, exactly.
Member of the panel have any other points they wish to raise? Do the officers want to come back at all on any points? Councillor Scott, as Cabinet Member, do you want to come in and give a perspective?
Yes, thank you. It's Councillor Cathy Scott. I'm the Cabinet Lead for Housing. I'd just like to thank you all today, and the most important thing here is about the tenant's voice and also your TRAs. They are important to us throughout all this approach. And some of the things that were brought up, you said about the council, about not listening, we are listening to you. It's the most important thing that we listen to you. And there is going to be panels and things that we will be looking at, which you will be feeding into. So all your concerns that you raise will be coming back. I'm on the end of the phone. I am your local councillor to some of you. And some of the issues today wasn't aware of, but I can pick them up at the side of this for you. But the voice is the most important thing. You make it happen, and it's not just about housing. It's about your homes and your environment. Tell us what's happening, because you'll feed into a process, and whatever decision's made will be a good decision because you were part of it.
Can we just...
We never see you at voting time.
Well, that's perhaps outside of the scope of this panel. And can I just say, can all comments come through the chair, please? Okay, all right. Thank you very much for talking to us about how you feel about tenant engagement. And we're going to now move on to the next item, which is also about tenant engagement. So it's about a potential approach to creating a co-produced tenant engagement model and approaches to establishing tenant involvement in the decision-making process. Okay, so do you want to just run through a little bit of what has been in the paper? If you want to stay and listen to this item, please do, because this is what is being proposed. Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. This particular part of the paper was really all about, come March, Cabinet make a decision. If that decision involves future change, how do we involve tenants throughout? So what we're trying to do is put a starter for 10 together, not set in stone, can be adapted and adjusted. But the first part really echoes, I think, what you've just been saying to us, which is what we'd really like to do is involve tenants throughout, right from the beginning. So if there was a decision is made in March, during that election period of May and April, what we'll do is we'll look to start and make sure we establish with the different tenants, what should it look like, how should we engage people, what different mechanisms can we use. People have talked a lot today about how they'd like to be interacted with and how there needs to be a whole range of different approaches taken. So we'd use that time to work out how are we going to do this. Following on from that then, one option or a main approach that we could take is to make sure that we have enough time to consult and engage with people properly. So that would mean from June through to August, using all those different methods we'd already decided on between us in order to engage with people and hear what they had to say. At that point, we can then collate all that and feed that back into Cabinet to make sure that they are hearing the tenant's voice.
This, we said last time, didn't we, that we couldn't see the voice of the tenant through the model and the decision-making process as clearly as we wanted to, which is why this has come here. And one of the things that was in the customer standards was that you needed to carry out a consultation process equal to what had happened when the Almo had existed if you wished to change models. And so can I ask, is this following those customer standards? If a decision is taken to change the model from an Almo model to another model, do these follow those customer standards on consultation?
I think they actually improve on them, because the original one was 20 years ago, as people have been saying. So what we'd look to do there is actually introduce a whole range of different ways to enable people to connect with us in a way that suits them. So rather than limit it to the original one, actually widen the chance and opportunity for people to talk to us.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to ask, what ways do you think you can broaden and widen the opportunity for people to get involved and raise their concerns and voice their issues?
Yeah, good question, no problem. I think there's a whole raft of different ways. So there's pop-up shops that people do now. We can take advantage of the electronic lanes online means that some people prefer. We do workshops with people, we can do meeting sessions, we can do a whole raft of different techniques and methods, as well as for those people who don't necessarily want to talk to us, making sure we do a postal option as well.
What we're keen to understand throughout this process is what tenants, through you, Chair, would like to see in a future housing service. We've got, through you again, Chair, we have some feedback today about some of the things that they would like to see change. We'd like to engage a broader range of tenants, throughout, by the various means that we have, to enable people to engage and enact with us at the same time, in the way that they feel is most appropriate and on the themes they would like to. So that we get a kind of rich element of feedback that enables us to respond more sophisticatedly than a binary choice of a yes or no. Yeah.
Just one relatively minor point, I think, really, and I appreciate this is only a starter for 10, as you said, but we gathered some pretty useful information, I think, at our last meeting from TPAS, who clearly have a whole suite of possibilities as to how you can effectively engage with tenants and residents. And I'm sure none of it's rocket science, but it would seem very sensible to draw on their expertise and indeed potentially their resources as well. And I didn't see any mention of them in the people you might be involving in this.
For ourselves, we have an ongoing relationship with TPAS. They're not in there because they're a key partnership for us, so it is an oversight for not stating that. It's an expectation on our half that we would work with them. Our Partnership and Engagement Service have worked extensively with TPAS in order to produce some of the things that we have in place already, and I'd expect that challenge and that thoughtfulness to come back for them on anything going forward.
Can I ask, in the world of health scrutiny, okay, there's a difference between the word engagement and the word consultation. And in this paper that you're discussing a way forward of talking about any potential decision to change models, you're using the word engagement. What weight would that engagement have? Because people see engagement as talking to people and consultation as actually asking how they would feel about a specific thing. So what weight does engagement have as opposed to consultation? Does it have the same weight or is it different when it comes to a cabinet report and decision making?
So, Chair, thank you for that. And we have the cabinet member here, and who has just said that listening to the tenant is paramount. Listening to the voice of the tenant and Hackett and other legislation is demanding that greater scrutiny of landlords from the tenant. So we're very mindful of that. So the engagement is a model to enable us to interact rather than just have a binary choice around something. So we would lend quite a significant weight and emphasis on what the tenants were saying back to us.
Significant.
I'm going to let Cabinet decide what significant should mean, really. As an officer, I would say it would be a risk not to hear what the tenants were saying to us.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Sorry, just going back to your engaging and consulting with people. There's always a group of people that are very hard to reach. Some of the ladies and gentlemen who've come today reference some of the people who are not really part of the community, perhaps don't look after their gardens, etc. How do you communicate and engage those citizens?
One of the things that we mention on the paper here is about a citizen engagement panel. And whilst we have been very, very clear that what we're interested in here is the voice of the tenant, what that panel does is it brings together different agencies and make sure that we discuss how different people are engaging and consulting with. Because we're conscious that although somebody might be hard to reach for us, actually for another agency, they're talking to them anyway. So we'd look to see what they had and how they were being able to connect with people. So tie that in.
Can I ask as well, item 10, approaches to establishing tenant involvement in the decision-making process. If it was a registered provider, we've discussed before, haven't we, then it would be the registered provider who would do that engagement. If it was Almo or in-house, then the Almo would need to have things in place for decision-making and engagement with tenants. If it was in-house, then that gets into the whole council decision-making process. And we were asking before about not losing the voice of the tenant through that council process, which can be quite long and as well. And you provided a paper on how other areas have different panels. Because one of the things you were saying was the current tenant and leaseholder panel might continue, or housing scrutiny might, for pre-decision, etc., might continue. Now, I noticed that one of the examples you've had on is Wigan having a housing advisory panel. And when I looked at that, you've put joint panel of tenants and councillors. And when I looked on the Wigan website, so I appreciate I've looked at a website, so it might be out of date, but that was 6 councillors and 2 tenant reps. So that is, do you think that would be the way going forward, to have a balance of councillors and a balance of tenants? Or would you see something going forward as being an equal balance, or a tenant panel and then councillors separately? Or how would you see that operating in that decision-making process? Because to me, that isn't a joint panel.
So getting the balance right in these things obviously is always very tricky, because you need to respect the fact that we're a local government organisation and a council, and the governance arrangements that determine how a council should operate and how its decisions should be made, alongside wanting to hear the tenant's voice and giving the tenant's voice sufficient weighting in decision making and sufficient influence in decision making. So the panel, the advisory panel in Wigan was an example that we were able to see and say, what of that is good and what of that would we wish to change? And so similarly with the other models. So we haven't concluded, but we are absolutely clear that given where we are in terms of our journey around delivering housing services, that the weighting we give to the voice of the tenant has to be adequate enough for tenants to feel that they have appropriate levels of influence in the decision-making process. And I will have to be guided by Cabinet on some of this, because I haven't put some of those models in front of them yet to say which one suits the model of local government.
Sorry, no disrespect to K&H, you had 97 TRAs that you could have talked to. You've let them go. The amount of TRAs that asked for help, they didn't get it. You've lost the voice of the tenants. I hate saying it, but I'm going to say it. You cherry-picked who goes on your panels. That's how it feels to some of us.
Okay, so if you can address your remarks through the chair, because it's not a, yeah. But do I take it, so if I'm understanding that, what different layers of engagement, so something that's engagement with local TRAs and something that's engagement on a strategic level as well, so that everybody has a say throughout a decision-making process. Is that what you think is needed for the future?
Yes, it's starting from the word grassroots, which is what people was put there for in the first place, for the tenants, from the grassroots. That grassroots has gone. So we need to go back to start from grassroots, ask them what they want, involve them. I do agree with what Tracy said, the TRAs has gone now, but there is still TRAs there that are willing to help that aren't being engaged with. But can I just, that wasn't my question, I was just agreeing with Tracy. My question is, you're on about this taking it in-house or keeping it as an ALMO and that, and then starting off with strategies and asking tenants and things like that. When they did it, 20 years ago, they made that, the tenants made that decision. It had to go out to every tenant. The model went out to every tenant, didn't it, to ask, is that what you wanted? Am I right thinking this is going to happen again? Or is this just going to be a decision in-house? Please.
I think that is what we as a scrutiny panel are asking as to the engagement that will happen. Okay, so that when we've been asking those questions about how that engagement will happen, that as a scrutiny panel we are asking questions because of the customer standards that are there, that if a changing model is proposed, then it is recommended that the consultation or engagement is on a similar level to what, right? So as a scrutiny panel we're asking that. It is then for the scrutiny panel to make recommendations on what evidence it's heard, whatever those recommendations are, and then for the Cabinet to look at that report, look at the recommendations and make a decision based on what the officers' reports have said and what the scrutiny report has said. Okay, so that is how it works. And this is the scrutiny exploring the different options and looking at how things may be proposed if there is a proposal for a changing model. Does that clarify? Yeah, okay. I'm not saying what the recommendations may or may not be, but what I'm saying is that's the reasons for the questions. Yeah.
Please. Going back 20 years ago, we're looking at this model now. So we jump back 20 years ago where we posted at that point out to every tenant. I know there's a cost to this, but there's also a cost on the internet and everywhere else that you look to. And if obviously there's people in the homes that can help and fill these forms in, I'd like you to look back at how much percentage did you get back 20 years ago when you posted that, to have a look and see how much we got back to how much you think we'd get back now by doing it on computers that people can't get on. To me, post it to every home, no matter how much it costs. It's their choice at the end of the day what they want you to do. Thank you.
Can I just did you want to come back in? Right, okay. Do you want to answer?
So I can assure you that we will be writing to every tenant to ask for it through the chair. Sorry, through chair. I can assure that the council will be writing to every single tenant to ask for their view.
Could I just say one? Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think at this stage it might just be useful to get a reminder of what the statutory obligations are for recognising the voice of the tenant and what structures might be relevant to the three models.
What are the statutory obligations in relation to the three models as far as tenants are concerned?
As a registered provider, any landlord has very similar statutory obligations. So they are regulated by someone called the Social Housing Regulator, which is a government agency that has the powers to inspect any landlord and provider of housing services that provides affordable housing and is registered with them. We have statutory obligations around the council's strategic housing function, which is outside of the scope of this review in terms of housing services and housing management services. So it's a distinction between regulatory standards and statutory obligations of a council.
I was thinking more specifically how that relates to the voice of the tenant, because we've got a structure in place with K&H at the moment where they've got representation on the board. Is that a structure that was put in place in cooperation with the council? Is that a statutory obligation? If services come back into the council or out to a registered provider, what are the obligations to make sure that tenants are represented at various levels and various decision-making processes?
Trying to understand that question, Chair. But
what are the standards that are required for for tenant engagement throughout decision-making processes? Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
At the risk of potentially being wrong, because I don't know every detail, but there are no differences for landlords in that sense. So, we all have to behave in exactly the same way. So, by way of example, compliance with health and safety issues requires the voice of the tenant to be fully engaged in and the openness and transparency agenda, particularly post Grenfell and Hackett. We have to publish things like fire and risk assessments, refresh them every 5 years. Those are just obligations that every landlord has statutorily and legally. So that's just one example. So there are many others like that, but they apply equally across a landlord service. If you are in the affordable housing sector, if you are in the private rented sector, they are slightly different.
Okay, I'll come at this from a slightly different angle, because what I'm interested in really, at the moment, from the last meeting, we got some positive feedback about the engagement with K&H at board and strategic level. Now, that structure was put in place as part of the Almore, presumably in cooperation with the council. That's not a statutory obligation, is it? Right, okay. And there is no obligation to do anything like that if services come back in-house. So from that perspective, there's no difference. I'm trying to get to a point of, is it any easier or more difficult to improve, fix problems with tenant engagement in any of the three models?
I would argue it's not any easier or any more difficult. I would say that it depends on the context in which you operate in, the satisfaction levels of tenants, and the most prevalent issues of the day that will determine what kind of engagement model and what kind of involvement model that you would put in place. But that is not a statutorily defined model. So if we wanted to have a housing advisory panel, should it be in-house, where there are 8 tenants and 2 councillors, we can. In the housing association model, if you want to have a tenant on the board, if you want to have 5 tenants on the board, you can. If you want to have none, you can also do that. But the regulator will arrive at a judgment about how involved your tenants are in decision making as a result of the models that you operate and the practices that you are, and obviously the performance data that they can see.
So as far as the regulator is concerned, it's outcomes that matters and not particularly the structure, is what we're trying to get to. And that structure, obviously, if it's in-house, there's a great deal of control. If it's in K&H, then there's an element of control, but that's got to be done in cooperation. And if it's with a registered provider, the least control, I would imagine. Thank you.
Some of us can remember the housing management committees, as I've said before, and that was committees of councillors with tenants there. And so that to me is why I'm asking, and that, you know, we went then to area forums that have been said about where it was tenants that were there and councillors attended sometimes. And so I think it's gone from one way to another. And so from my questions is, how is it going to go going forward to ensure that there is no swing the other way? Do you know what I mean? If it's brought in-house, there is no swing the other way to just councillors or cabinet members, that the voice of the tenant is there and present.
As an officer, I think I'm absolutely clear on the steer that the Cabinet have given us is that we want to strengthen the voice of the tenant, not weaken it. So anything that undermines that voice, we would have to look at very, very carefully. I do have to say that it would be difficult because unless tenants are elected members, to have them on the Cabinet would be very difficult, Chair. Yeah.
Things like this. But the lady in black there wanted to make a point to the scrutiny panel.
If you're talking about sending letters out, I think you do have to be very careful now, because tenants have really lost all faith in anything that comes from Kirtleys, and it's just been, you do have to word letters so very, very carefully that they can understand them. I mean, some of the words used this afternoon, they just probably wouldn't know what you were talking about. But it is important that they want to open a letter and really feel, I want to read this letter.
And abbreviations.
And not to have to reply on, you know, just to make the reply easy for them.
Just make it easy.
All right, yeah. I think we could understand where you're coming from with that one. It's, yeah. And abbreviations are never easy for anybody. No. Okay. All right then. So have we, items 9 and 10 then, have we asked the questions that we wish to ask on those items? Yes. So the STAR survey results at item 11, this was here for further information. Does the panel have any questions that you wish to ask on this one? No. And the quality impact assessment and vulnerable tenants query that we had, officers were to report on that. Do you want to come in on that one? The equality impact assessment and vulnerable tenants, item 12, it says officers to report. We were asking for equality impact assessments in relation to any decisions as to where they were and who they were, how they were being carried out.
Apologies, Chair, now that you've said Councillor Pinnock asked that question, I do recall it. The reason I was conflabbing was that I had lost sight of that for this meeting. But we have actioned it with our equality, inclusion and diversity manager in the policy team and another member of the policy team who's just joined. And what we have done is joined up how we do impact assessments on climate change and equality together so that it's an integrated impact assessment, which has made it slightly more difficult for officers to get their heads around, it has to be said. So we're on a learning journey, which is why we haven't been able to complete it as fully as we would like. But the advice we're getting back from our colleagues in policy is let's just wait until you have narrowed down, once your report, Chair, from this scrutiny panel has been published, that we will then do some impact assessments on the back of those two reports. Yeah.
To your question, Councillor Pinnock. Yeah, okay. Right then, so we're at item 13, which is a future schedule of meetings then. So there will be an informal meeting of the panel held on the 19th of February. The process is that if we feel that we have gathered all the evidence together, then a report will be drawn up We will discuss recommendations, and the recommendations and the report from the scrutiny panel will then go through the processes of Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee and to Cabinet. Okay. So I think the next meeting will be the informal on the 19th. All right. Can I thank everybody for coming today and for sharing their thoughts with us? Thank you very much for that. It has been a great help to us. Thank you. And thank you to officers and Councillor Scott for coming as well. Thank you, and we now close the meeting.